A nation is not merely a piece of land surrounded by borders, filled with people and governed by constitutions. A nation is the corporate expression of values, ideologies, convictions, and, most importantly, its spiritual compass. When a leader opens their mouth to speak on behalf of a nation, it is not just political language. It is spiritual language cloaked in policy. Words become weapons, declarations become decrees, and warnings become prophetic signals in the atmosphere. America has spoken. It has said to Iran, "Do not cross the line." That is not just geopolitical dialogue. That is a spiritual declaration of boundaries. That is a sound wave in the realm of authority. And when a voice with influence speaks, heaven takes notice, hell reacts, and the earth shifts. The warning to Iran is not just about missiles or military movements. It is about moral alignment. It is about standing on one side of prophecy or the other. It is about whether a nation will support what God has already established or oppose what God has already spoken. You see, when America declares unwavering support for Israel, it is not merely taking a diplomatic stance. It is revealing its spiritual alignment. It is showing which side of history it chooses to stand on. Because in every conflict that has spiritual undertones, neutrality is rebellion, silence is complicity, and confusion is corruption. When you listen carefully to the tone of a nation, you can detect the heartbeat of its leadership. A spiritually awakened leader will speak with the awareness that his words don't just travel to ears. They travel into realms, they shift atmospheres, they either summon angels or stir up adversaries. When America says our support for Israel is unshaken, it is stepping into a prophetic identity. It is not just endorsing a nation, it is aligning with a covenant. A covenant that did not begin in 1948, but one that was spoken thousands of years ago when God said to Abraham, "I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who curse you." So when Iran rattles its sword and pushes against the edge of war, and when America responds with a warning, you must ask, what is the spirit behind the statement? Because warnings are not always rooted in fear of conflict. Sometimes warnings are the last act of mercy before judgment. Sometimes warnings are not threats. They are invitations to reconsider destiny. When a nation like Iran positions itself in hostility toward the apple of God's eye, it is not just challenging a country, it is challenging the author of time. It is not just stepping into a battlefield, it is walking into a prophetic collision. And make no mistake, the line being drawn is not just territorial, it is spiritual, it is moral, it is historical. It is a line between light and darkness, truth and deception, covenant and conspiracy. This statement, "Do not cross the line," is a call to discern the season. It is a plea not to provoke divine justice. It is a trumpet sound echoing to every throne, every council chamber, every general and president. Be careful what battle you choose, because some battles are already decided. You can negotiate treaties, you can sign accords, you can draft peace deals, but when a nation touches what God has sanctified, it does not answer to man, it answers to heaven. And when heaven responds, it does not send a press release. It sends consequences, because heaven doesn't operate on majority vote. It moves by eternal verdicts. Leadership, therefore, is not about having a seat in the Oval Office or holding power in the Senate. Leadership is about representing divine will in human decisions. It's about standing in the gap between policy and prophecy, and knowing that your decision may either preserve your nation or position it for judgment. So, when a leader says, "We stand with Israel," it is not just politics, it is prophetic obedience. It is a recognition that this nation is blessed not because of its economy, not because of its military, but because of its posture before God. When a nation supports Israel, it aligns with the author of the narrative, and when it opposes Israel, it aligns with the antagonist of the story. This is not a fairy tale. This is not ancient history being reenacted in modern warfare. This is prophecy unfolding in real time, and the world is the stage. Every missile is a script line. Every statement from Washington or Tehran is part of a divine dialogue that has been echoing since Eden. So I ask, what spirit speaks through your nation? What voice guides your policies? What altar are your leaders bowing to when decisions are made? Because the line is not just about Iran or America. The line is in every nation. The line is in every government. The line is in every heart. And the question is, when that line is drawn, will you recognize it, or will you cross it blindly, thinking it is merely a suggestion, because once it is crossed, you cannot negotiate with consequence. You can only experience it, you can only endure it, or you can choose to turn back before it's too late. You don't need to be a prophet to know the season we're in. You just need to open your ears to the frequency of heaven. Listen to what is not being said in the news. Listen to what is vibrating in the silence between headlines, because even when the cameras turn off, the realm of the Spirit is still broadcasting. God is still speaking. The warning is still ringing. Do not cross the line. When you look at the map of the Middle East, you will see borders, names of nations, rivers, and coastlines. But when heaven looks at that same map, it sees prophecy. It sees patterns. It sees promises in motion. Israel, to many, is just a small country, a strip of land barely visible next to its massive neighbors. But in the realm of divine intention, Israel is not a piece of land. It is a piece of eternity manifested in time. It is not just a place. It is a plan, and every act against it is an act against that plan. You see, God does not simply work through places. He works through prophecy, and prophecy is not poetry. It's destiny written in divine ink. When God chose Israel, He was not just selecting a people group to bless. He was creating a timepiece that would track the movement of His will through history. Israel is a calendar. Every war, every peace treaty, every gathering of the nations, every tension in the land, it is all ticking according to a timeline set in heaven, not in the United Nations. This is why no matter how many times nations rise against her, Israel remains. This is why every empire that has tried to erase her has ended up erased. Babylon rose and fell. Persia rose and fell. Greece rose and fell. Rome rose and fell. Hitler rose and fell. And still, the name Israel remains. Not because of her military strength, not because of her technology, but because of her assignment. She carries the blueprint of redemption in her soil. The footsteps of the Messiah walked her streets. The voice of the prophets cried from her mountains. The covenant of God was etched into her DNA, and this is what confuses the carnal mind. Because when people see conflict in Israel, they think it's about politics, territory, or oil. But the real war is over time. The enemy knows he has but a short time. He's not just fighting a people, he's fighting a deadline. Every time Israel advances, the clock moves closer to the return of the King. Every time Jerusalem is defended, prophecy is preserved, and when nations speak against Israel, they are not simply expressing foreign policy. They are resisting divine timing. Iran may threaten, alliances may shift. But prophecy cannot be delayed. It cannot be negotiated. You cannot sanction what God has established. You cannot dismantle what he has decreed. The attempt to destabilize Israel is the attempt to reset a clock you did not create. That is why the battle will always intensify around her, because Israel is not the finish line. She is the timeline. When you want to know where we are in God's plan, don't look at the economy. Don't look at Hollywood. Don't look at Washington. Look at Jerusalem. Look at the Temple Mount. Look at the rumblings in the Negev, because Israel is the prophetic barometer of human history. When America stands with Israel, it is not merely choosing an ally, it is choosing to walk in step with time. It is choosing to stand with the agenda of heaven. It is aligning with the script of the ages. And when America says, our support for Israel is unshaken, that is not just politics. That is providence. That is wisdom. That is preservation. Because to turn your back on Israel is to walk blindfolded into the future. It is to unplug your nation from the prophetic signal of heaven. It is to choose darkness over discernment. Israel has always been surrounded, always outnumbered, always misunderstood, and yet she survives. That alone should make every leader pause. Every time missiles fly toward her, something supernatural intercepts. Every time conspiracies rise against her, they collapse under the weight of their own arrogance. Why? Because you can fight a man and win. You can fight a system and prevail. But you cannot fight a prophecy and survive. You cannot cancel what God has already confirmed. This is why every statement against Israel is more dangerous than it appears. It's not just a sentence. It's a stance. It reveals what side of the timeline you are standing on. And to stand against prophecy is to invite the consequences of being out of sync with divine rhythm. That's why Israel is always at the center of the shaking. That's why news outlets can't look away from her. That's why the ground she walks on is contested. Because she's not walking through history, she is history walking. The conflict is a confirmation. The tension is a testimony. The threats are just signals that the timeline is accurate. Because the enemy does not fight what is irrelevant. He fights what is essential, and Israel is essential to the completion of God's redemptive agenda. The Messiah came through her. The gospel spread from her. The return of Christ will center around her. So how can you claim to believe in prophecy and yet be indifferent to Israel? This is why believers must rise in discernment. You cannot afford to be neutral when time is speaking. You cannot afford to be casual when eternity is pressing into time. You must understand that to honor Israel is not idolization. It is alignment. It is recognition of the clock God placed on the earth. When you honor her, you are not exalting man, you are acknowledging God. You are agreeing with his choice, and that agreement unlocks blessing, not just for individuals, but for nations. So when America speaks, when it issues a warning to Iran, when it declares that support for Israel will not waver, it is not just taking a military position. It is declaring its place in prophecy. It is saying, we will walk with time, not fight against it. Because history belongs to those who recognize what heaven is doing and move with it. If you listen only with your natural ears, you will think that the battles in the Middle East are simply territorial. You will hear about borders, water rights, nuclear programs, refugees, sanctions, embassies, and ceasefires. You'll hear politicians and pundits arguing over policies, lines drawn on maps, and historical claims to soil. But what you must understand is that this is not just about land. This is about lordship. This is not about square miles. This is about sovereignty. It is not about who owns the ground. It is about who rules the heavens above it. You see, wherever God has spoken, Satan has always contested. Wherever there is a covenant, there is conflict. The region of the Middle East is not just politically hot, it is spiritually volatile, because the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob declared that land holy. He assigned it to a people. He established it as a prophetic hub for his redemptive plan, and anything God establishes, Satan opposes, not by ignoring it, but by imitating it, corrupting it, and trying to claim it. This is the real reason for the perpetual war. It is not about oil. It is not about race. It is not even about religion in its modern form. It is about who has the right to rule, who has the right to say, "This belongs to me." The devil has always wanted to sit on a throne that is not his. He has always desired to rule where he has no ownership. That's what the conflict is about. It is the ancient war of kingdoms, manifesting through nations. So when Iran rises and challenges Israel, it is not just making a political move. It is acting on behalf of a rebellious kingdom, a counterfeit system, a rival agenda. It is a spiritual defiance expressed through military aggression, and when America responds by saying, "Do not cross the line," it is more than deterrence. It is a declaration that some ground is not up for negotiation because it was sealed by divine ownership. When you see leaders fighting over Jerusalem, don't be deceived. They are not fighting over architecture. They are fighting over authority. That city was chosen by God, not by man. That land was sanctified, not by soldiers, but by the word of the living God. And whatever God sets apart, Satan seeks to desecrate. That's why conflict surrounds it. That's why violence erupts around it, because the enemy does not want land. He wants to rob God of worship by stealing the place where God said, "Here I will dwell." The Middle East is the epicenter of this age-old rebellion, and Israel stands at the center of it, not because she wants war, but because she carries destiny. Her very existence is a reminder that God keeps his covenant. Her survival is a threat to every demonic agenda that tries to rewrite history. The battle isn't about boundaries, it's about belief. Who will be believed, the God of Israel or the God of this world? Lordship is the core issue. You must ask yourself who has the right to rule, who has the final say over nations, who owns the land, the air, the sea, and the souls of men. And here is the truth that shakes the foundations of kingdoms. The earth is the Lord's, and the fullness thereof, not the United Nations, not Washington's, not Tehran's, the Lord's. The one who created it has never transferred ownership. He has delegated stewardship to leaders, but the title deed still bears his name. So when war breaks out, it is not just a clash of weapons. It is a clash of worldviews. One view says, we can take what we want, redefine what God has spoken, and build our empires on defiance. The other view says, we will stand with what God has declared, even if it costs us politically, financially, or militarily. That's not politics. That's lordship. That's a recognition that some altars are more powerful than armies. Some covenants are more unbreakable than contracts. Some names are above every government. And here is what must be understood. You cannot be neutral in a war of lordship. Every nation will have to choose. Who will you serve? Who will you believe? Who will you stand with when the shaking begins? Because the issue is not whether Israel will be attacked. The issue is who will stand with her when she is. And the answer to that question reveals the soul of a nation. It reveals whether your nation bows to political convenience or prophetic alignment. You see, kingdoms clash when crowns compete, and there are many crowns in the earth, but only one true king. And that king has declared who the land belongs to. That king has declared who the covenant is with. And when nations rebel against that, they don't just create conflict. They declare war on the will of God. And no nation has ever survived a war against God. So when Iran threatens and America warns and Israel braces, the real question is, whose lordship is being acknowledged, because the battle is not for land, it is for legacy. It is for who will be remembered in eternity as those who stood for the King of Kings, or those who bowed to the pressure of earthly thrones. Lordship demands loyalty. It demands allegiance. And in this hour, nations are being weighed, not by their GDP, not by their military strength, but by their recognition of divine rule. This is not about ancient history. It's about eternal destiny. And the conflict in the Middle East is the mirror through which God is showing the world, you must choose which crown you honor, the crown of man or the crown of the Lamb. Nations do not rise by chance, and they do not fall by coincidence. Every empire, every kingdom, every republic, whether ancient or modern, exists under the surveillance of divine order. No matter how powerful, no matter how advanced, no matter how historic their legacy may be, they are all accountable to something greater than law, policy, or constitution. They are accountable to prophecy, because prophecy is not prediction. It is pre-written purpose. It is the mind of God revealed in advance. It is heaven's agenda unfolding in earth's timeline. And when a nation opposes prophecy, it is not engaging in politics. It is entering rebellion. You must understand, God does not react to history. He writes it. And when he speaks something through the mouths of his prophets, he binds himself to his own word. That means prophecy is not optional. It cannot be revised by nations, reversed by enemies, or delayed by resistance. Prophecy has an appointment with manifestation, and whoever aligns with it walks in blessing, but whoever resists it walks into judgment. This is where many leaders and nations miscalculate. They believe power is in policy. They believe strength is in alliances. They believe security is in economics. But history has shown us over and over again, when you position yourself against what God has declared, your resources become irrelevant. Your might becomes meaningless. Your armies become dust, because no amount of nuclear power can override divine purpose. When God said he would gather Israel from the nations, he meant it. When he said the land would blossom again, he meant it. When he said Jerusalem would be restored, he meant it. And when he said that he would bless those who bless Abraham's descendants and curse those who curse them, he meant it. These were not metaphors. These were not cultural idioms. These were decrees, eternal ones. So when a modern-day nation positions itself to dismantle, delay, or deny what God has decreed about Israel, that nation is not just taking a stance. It is taking a risk. Because no matter how intelligent your diplomats are, no matter how persuasive your speeches may sound, no matter how well crafted your strategies are, if you stand against prophecy, you are standing on a trapdoor. You are planting your flag on cursed soil. You are staking your future on a contradiction, and it is only a matter of time before what is invisible becomes undeniable, because prophecy never fails, and when prophecy collides with rebellion, prophecy wins. Every time. This is why Iran's position is not just dangerous, it is suicidal. Its resistance is not only political, it is spiritual sabotage. It is building a future on opposition to the will of God. It is constructing national identity around defiance of covenant. It is shaking its fist at heaven while pretending to manage earth. And the tragic reality is that this is not new. Nations have always believed they could override what God established. Pharaoh tried it. Nebuchadnezzar tried it. Rome tried it. And every time the same verdict fell. Your kingdom has been weighed and found wanting. This warning does not just apply to Iran. It applies to any nation, any leader, any institution, any alliance that builds its foundation in contradiction to prophecy. Because prophecy is not static, it moves, it builds momentum, it manifests in layers, and when your nation is caught on the wrong side of that movement, you do not simply face instability, you face divine resistance. Now pause and think. What happens when heaven resists a nation? What happens when God no longer blesses a land's economy? What happens when protection is lifted and enemies gain access? What happens when confusion overtakes leadership and division eats away at the core of unity? That's not geopolitics, that's judgment. That's not poor strategy, that's divine silence. That's the result of standing against what was never yours to fight. You see, alignment is the key to national preservation. It is not enough for a nation to have policies. It must have principles rooted in divine truth. And the highest truth in this age is that God is fulfilling His word concerning Israel. That the land, the people, the capital, the conflicts, and the covenants are all part of an unfolding narrative that cannot be vetoed. Nations are being positioned, lines are being drawn, and history is watching who will align with heaven and who will pretend it can't hear. This is why America's warning to Iran is not just about missiles or red lines. It is a moment of national posture. It is a declaration, conscious or not, that America is choosing to at least stand adjacent to prophecy rather than oppose it. And while America has its own sins, its own flaws, and its own spiritual battles, one thing remains true. When it blesses Israel, it preserves its own window of mercy. But the moment any nation, even one as powerful as America, turns its back on that alignment, its future enters jeopardy, not because of political backlash, but because of prophetic backlash. Because when you break with prophecy, you break with protection. When you oppose covenant, you invite consequence. So let this be a warning. Let this be a trumpet in the ears of every leader, every diplomat, every influencer of national destiny. Align your nation with prophecy. Do not be deceived by temporary gain. Do not sell your soul for oil, trade deals, or military pride. Prophecy is the only guarantee of survival, not because it makes you immune to conflict, but because it makes you immune to collapse. There is a shaking coming, and when the shaking begins, the only nations that will stand are those rooted in what God has spoken. All others will crumble, not because they were weak, but because they were rebellious. Their fall will be proof that you cannot win a war against the Word of God.